See some of you guys, I joked to some of you, say you guys clean up well when you're off the boat. But it's a pleasure to be here. Elisangela and I were stateside for a little while. I'm attending seminary at Southwestern in Dallas. I tell people I didn't get it right the first time, I had to come back. But this time, Daniel and David are also attending school here in the U.S. So Elisangela and I were kind of going back and forth, spending some time in Brazil. Spent most of the summer in Brazil this time, and kind of leading things from here. So some of you have been on the boat, you've heard the story, and there were some people asking. Our work began in the early 50s when my father went from the U.S. He's actually from Brazil, attended school in the U.S., and went to Brazil to translate for some missionaries on the Amazon. Fell in love with the place. We actually, Elisangela was doing some research on the history, and we found my mother had some copies. He used to type letters with that carbon paper to make copies. And we found a letter from him to a friend saying, he said, since I was 12 years old, I wanted to know and to live in the Amazon. So this is 1950, early 50s. He goes to the Amazon, was looking for a place to work. Baptist Convention took him to different places where they wanted to plant churches. He said, no, God is just not speaking to my heart. They asked for, is there anywhere else? So they talked to him about Parintins, which some of you have been there. Well, but back then, Parintins was, it's on an island, was a large village, no streets. I think there was like one street in the front, no electricity, no running water. These things were still about to arrive there. Found about 10 Christians that he used to meet with them under a tree. But he was warned by the Baptist Convention that it was a very hostile place to the Protestant church there. And people didn't accept Protestant churches, as we were called back then. So as he was warned, he suffered a huge persecution. They poisoned his groceries one time. He was warned in time. So for many years, our family had other people buying groceries for us. They tried to set his hut on fire. We had a house, and then it was lost, a matchbox with some burned out matches, where he hears his neighbor yelling at someone, a lady, and he comes out at night. There's these two guys trying to set his hut on fire with them inside. But as some of you have heard, his family, they had a lab in South Brazil. So he knew a lot about pharmacy because he worked at the lab with his father. And they would send medication to him, and he became like the doctor in town. And one episode that we usually, when we tell the story, I like to refer to that, is that there was one week there, he saved the baby of the meanest man on the island who lived near the church. And he called a good Baptist church, back then, had to have at least one revival a year. So he gets some missionaries from Manaus to come and do a revival service. And the first question was, is it safe? It's like, oh yeah, they kind of like me now, things are a little better. So the night of the revival, a mob comes in to kill my father and the missionaries that were with him. This man, whose baby he had saved a few days before that, comes out with 2 machetes, and the village knew him, how aggressive he was, stood by the gate of the church and said, you guys are going to have to get through me to get to the pastor. So the mayor comes out, starts shooting his gun to spread the crowd. But about this time in Parintins, electricity had just arrived, and there was a factory. These 2 British brothers, they had a factory that produced jute. It's a fiber made out of this vine. They do ropes and bags and things like that. They sent an old bus to pick the missionaries up, and my father and my mother took him to the factory for protection. Well, the mob went to the front of the city. They roll a log to hit the boat where the missionary kids were. The guy that was taking care of it cuts the rope, backs the boat up, People are jumping in the water with knives in their mouths, trying to kill the kids, swim to the boat. He's able to regroup with the missionaries later. And this is the beginning of the work on the Amazon, the beginning of the church that some of you have been to today, in many years, and for many years, since 1908, right, 2008. But I grew up seeing my parents going through many difficulties. And I had an opportunity to come to the U.S. at the age of 14. Went to a boarding school, didn't speak any English. My sister took me to school. This is end of April. She said, I'm in finals. She was in college. Learn English as fast as you can. Stay out of trouble. I won't be able to be back here for the next 2 months. See you later. So I did high school in the U.S., ended up doing college in the U.S., and my goal was to live the American dream and send down the check. So if you're telling God what you're going to do for him, be careful. And I told God I would never be in ministry, that I would never be a pastor. Well, Elisangela was a psychologist working with her church. She went to seminary in Brazil and told God she'd never marry a pastor. So I'll tell you the story, the rest of the story later. But in the process, in '86, my father had a major heart attack, and the doctors gave him 15 days to live. 1993, I graduated from college. He's still alive. I come home, had my resume. I had applied for different businesses, Brazilian businesses in the U.S. You know, had a business degree, spoke English. And I get home. He sits me down for about 2 hours in his office, shared the vision God gave him to our mission organization, which back then was just a bank account that some of his friends would send him some money to help with the work. It was in Memphis, Tennessee. And I didn't have the heart to tell him I had other plans. So I said, well, I'll stay here during the summer and I'll see what God has. Well, he said, I'm going to give you 1 week for you to rest, to see your friends, and I'm going to put you to work. 1 week of the conversation, he passed away to the day. And I stayed home for 2 years, and by then I realized I was going to run the mission organization. Had some friends that got me scholarships at Southwestern Seminary. I thought if I'm going to do missions, I need some theology. And I told God, this is where I draw the line. I'm not going to pastor a church. I'm going to run the mission organization as a business. And, well, the church invited me to pastor the church as I was graduating from seminary. So Elisangela said, you told me you're not going to be a pastor. So I told her, we'll be here for 2 years, restructuring the church. We're going to get another pastor to come in, and we're going to lead Amazon Vida, which today is Amazon Vida, the mission organization. Well, this was 26 years ago. Guess what we were doing? Leading the church, leading the mission organization. And I always joke, I say, now I'm telling God I will never go to Hawaii to ministry again. Don't send me there. Bahamas, don't even think about it. This is where I draw the line. Just to see what happens. But God has done some amazing things. When we got Spotting Chains, the church had maybe 60 people attending. We, I think over 1,000 members now. We don't have that every Sunday, but the church is reaching that many people. We had a handful of mission churches. Today we have 50 churches, a network of 50 churches on the river, reaching anywhere from 3 to 5 villages from every church. So our vision is a church accessible to every village, not necessarily in every village. So we've been using short-term mission teams like you guys when you come to Brazil. And the way it works is the teams come in, we visit certain areas, sometimes it takes many visits. We develop a core group, pray where God's going to show us. We develop a core group there, a Bible study. Our pastors come either from Parintins today or from one of our churches. And we develop a Bible study. From there, we identify potential leaders. And we bring them through training in Parintins. They come in every 2 months for a long weekend, so we don't take them out of context. We don't bring them to the city for 3 years. but they keep coming in every 2 months, and we train them, and then we work with them for them to lead what will become a new church plant. Well, we did this for a few years, and then COVID hit. And for us, COVID was, for the church, was a good thing. Not for all the suffering, but it's a good thing for us because it actually strengthened our churches. I told some friends that I believe we became more like the church Christ had in mind with our doors closed than we were with our doors open. The church really served and showed love and was engaged. The distractions, the language used during COVID was essential and non-essential. So all the non-essential of the church were removed, and only the essential things remained. We were able, through partnerships, to distribute oxygen to 7 hospitals around Parintins. Parintins and 7 hospitals. We were bringing 30 tanks a day through an aviation partnership to Parintins. And we started reaching other villages. So we posted this on Facebook, and a pastor from a city downriver from us texted me. He said, "Hey, Pastor, can you get us some oxygen?" I was like, "Yeah." So we sent him some tanks, and he posted on his Facebook page. He calls me the next day. "Hey, Pastor, a friend of mine from this city is asking if you can provide some oxygen for them." So we sent oxygen to them. Well, the next day after we had sent it, he calls me again. "Hey, this other guy," I was like, "Stop posting. We don't have oxygen for everybody." But our churches became centers of hope in the jungle. When mission organizations were pulling their people out, teams could not come in. Since our strategy is to train the local guys, the local leaders, they were there. And our village churches came out stronger out of COVID than they were before. The one thing that's happening is that before, we would get together with our pastors and decide where we're going to plant the next churches. So we would budget for it, look for resources, seek partnerships, so we could expand. Well, an organism that's alive and healthy grows. So now, these churches are coming to us and say, "Hey, we're starting a work here, there." We're seeing second and third generation churches take place. So we're like, wait a minute, we didn't budget for this. But God is just expanding the work. We have trained leaders today from 10 different tribes, 10 different people groups on the Amazon. We have in process, especially among the Sateré tribe, where some of you guys were, the team went this year. We have about 15 Bible studies in the process of becoming church plants. On the border of Peru and Colombia, we have a partnership. We have at least five places that we could start new churches. And God is just multiplying this. And so, Elisandro and I, David and Daniel were in the U.S. God opened the doors for us to come here. There's this was a miracle. In Brazil, because of COVID, when you go to get a visa for the United States, you have to go to the embassy and you do a personal interview with the person. And you pay all your fees, you get there. If they don't like your story, they just say, "Sorry, not this time." No explanation given. So for a student visa, the wait was backed up for 3 months. So we started the process, and I thought, January of 23, this was May 22, January 23, we were going to try to be in the U.S. When we turned our papers in, the lady in charge that was doing this for us called us and said, "Hey, can you be in Brazil in 10 days? I was like, "What do you mean?" She said, "There's an opening for all 4 of you." So we get to Brasilia, we get our paperwork. Elisandro we came to the embassy with a pile of papers, documents to prove a bunch of things, They want to kind of prove that you have to prove that you're not going to stay in the U.S., that you're going to go back. That's pretty much what they want to see. And we get there, imagine that you're in the bank teller, and you can hear everything that's going on with the person in front of you, and two families had their visas denied. They were really being selective because of COVID. And we were like, well, maybe not this time, maybe next semester. Well, long story short, in a 5-minute conversation, the guy gave us our visas. You know? We didn't know what to do. We kind of looked at each other like, whoa. So I called Darren, who's the chairman of our of Amazon building now. I said, hey, thought we were going to go in January. We need to get into the country in the next 60 days or we lose the visa. He said, we don't have a car, we don't have a house for you guys, but come, God will provide. Well, we've been here for 2 years now, almost 2 years, have 2 years to go. But we have been leading the mission from here in Brazil. People ask, how are they doing? I usually answer, they weren't supposed to be doing this good without us there, but we have been really blessed to see leadership stepping up, people that we've invested our lives in the last few years, just stepping up to the plate, running everything. We're there every day over the phone, talking and leading, but they are doing a lot of work. So leadership training is our main focus. One thing that we're dealing with now is that last year we had the biggest drought in over 100 years on the Amazon. So tributaries completely dried out. Well, this year, because the water was so low in the dry season, it stayed about 6 feet below average during the flood season. And the drought this year is being worse than last year. If you go online and you Google drought.
So the picture you're showing that you're walking along on the floor of the river, how deep would that normally be on an average?
15 feet,
Right.
20 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. The river where you did baptism is pretty much completely dry. It's just a little stretch of water there where you guys were. A lot of our churches are isolated, having a very hard time. We canceled our seminary meetings because they couldn't get to the city. This is going to create a major, like last year, major health and dental issues because they cannot come to the city, they cannot have access to the hospitals. So we're preparing ourselves to be able to provide for them and use that as an entrance door to bring the gospel in and bring not only health transformation, but a spiritual transformation to the villages and show the love of God through this. Water wells, medical, dental, those are going to be major needs for the next year. We have an opportunity. Before COVID, we had 250 students. We have 120 now. Our prayer is that we are able to return not only the students that we had before, but open new places that we've been invited to bring leadership training, especially, and equip people for church planting. So, just to finish, in Brazil there's over 300 Indian tribes. Last statistics shows, this is pre-COVID, there's 164 tribes without the gospel presence. Right? And I don't know how updated these numbers are, but the last numbers that we had is this. 20-some of these tribes are considered uncontacted people groups. That means tribes that are located in the center of the jungle that don't even dream that this exists. Right? They have no contact with the outside world, and the government keeps them that way. So missionaries are prohibited to enter the area. We're working right at the entrance of this reservation, one of these reservations. So the tribes that have access to the city, we're training leaders from them so they can take back because we cannot go in. And they are planting churches among them. We have the seminary training, the partnership we have near the border of Peru and Colombia, actually right on the border of Peru and Colombia. We had students that were traveling 8 days and 8 nights on those canoes with the long tail motor that you see on the trip to get to the training. I tell people we serve some amazing people. In the Sateré, we have a 70-some-year-old chief who's a pastor. He walks 10 hours through the jungle from his village to the village where we went to, because from there is our seminary students, they get together there and then they travel together to Parintins. So he walks by himself sometimes, 10 hours through the jungle. They say there is a path. I've seen videos and pictures. I don't see a path, but they say there is one. They cross like 3 small rivers, jungle rivers, and travels 2 days to Parintins for training, goes back and walks another 10 hours back to his village to take the gospel back to his people. So we serve some amazing people. And there are people, there's a network ready to be sent out. So we have the strategy that works. It's been proven. We have the staff. We have the workers. We're just looking for partners now that will help us send them out to do the work.
I was gonna say, when you say your church is out planting churches, what constitutes a church? Are you talking about a group of believers that they're meeting in homes?
Group of believers that usually meet constantly.
Talking about building buildings, I just wanna.
Buildings is usually the last part that comes in. We usually meet in somebody's house for a while until somebody donates land. Sometimes we buy land, but that's the last stage. Now, larger villages, it works different. Sometimes we come in first with the structure, the building structure, and then we work with humanitarian type of ministries like medical, dental, and we use that structure for that as we start trusting the people. Because the larger villages, and we're talking about villages with about a little over 1,000 people, they function more like a little city. They have more education, they have a higher educational level, they have a high school. Some of the people there may even be doing college online or going back and forth to Parintins. So that you easily build a better structure. The smaller village, the reason is also because the jungle villages are very high maintenance, meaning we have to be there constantly with them. If we don't go, one of our biggest worries now in the drought is that if we are not in contact with them, you come back, church may not exist anymore. There's a lot of conflicts among them. Usually the leader if it's a new leader, he gets challenged by the people with their biblical authority. So we provide radio programs so they can have access even when we don't go. But the building is not necessarily, it depends a lot on the location and the situation, but it's usually the last thing that comes in.
Does each village kind of provide for if they decide to do a building, does the village actually?
We do
Or
both
that-
ways. Either we provide the gas for them to cut the wood, if we're gonna build out of wood. If it's a bigger village, it has to be with bricks and a better structure. We provide the roof and the floor, and now we're working with them for them to slowly buy the bricks so we can close it in.
So it's a partnership.
So there's a partnership.
Yeah.
Either they come in the beginning or they come in at the end, but we make sure that they come in with
So
something.
that's important, that's all.
Yes, they take ownership of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Perfect, that's good.
Anybody else, I think?